Well, welcome to the 700 Club. On the Gregorian calendar, Sunday marked 75 years since David Ben-Gurion declared Israel a new nation. Israel celebrated back in April on the 25th and 26th. Yet in the middle of these celebrations, in the middle of the acknowledgement that a nation was born in a day, the UN is not celebrating this historic event.
Instead, it's commemorating what Palestinians call the Nakba. That's Arabic for catastrophe. This twisting of history has the Israeli ambassador to the UN up in arms. Chris Mitchell explains why.
Today, instead of observing the 75th anniversary of Israel, the UN is observing the anniversary of the Nakba, or catastrophe. The Nakba is what Palestinians say is their forcible eviction from the land of Palestine during Israel's War of Independence in 1948. Israeli ambassador to the UN Gilad Erdan blasted the UN, which is the source of many anti-Israel resolutions.
Instead of commemorating the real Nakba, the expulsion of almost 1 million Jews from Arab countries following the establishment of Israel, this biased organization is distorting its own history. I'm working to ensure that member states understand that attending this despicable event means destroying any chance of peace by adopting the Palestinian narrative, calling the establishment of the State of Israel a disaster, while ignoring Palestinian hate, incitement, terror, and refusal to accept the legitimacy of a Jewish state.
The anniversary comes just hours after a ceasefire ended a 5-day conflict between Israel and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. The terror group fired more than 1,400 rockets at southern Israel, landing as far away as Tel Aviv and on the outskirts of Jerusalem. Israel attacked hundreds of rocket launching sites, and the Iron Dome shot down about 90% of the rockets headed toward populated areas. A few did get through, as in the city of Ashkelon, and 2 died in separate rocket attacks. Many believe it's just a matter of time until another round of fighting will resume. And some expect it might come as early as Thursday, when Israelis will celebrate another anniversary, the reunification of the city of Jerusalem in 1967. Known as Jerusalem Day, it's marked by thousands of Israelis marching through the old city of Jerusalem, waving Israeli flags. Hamas has warned it will respond if the path of the march goes through the Muslim quarter. Despite today's controversy at the UN, Israeli commentator Gil Troy says the 75th anniversary marks a miraculous rebirth of the Jewish state after 2,000 years.
And if we think about the miracles of Israel, it's not just that Israel has survived despite so many enemies. It's not just that Israel has been a democracy. It's absorbed 3 million Jews from all over the world. White, black, religious, secular, doesn't matter. They're all welcome. It has created a startup nation which is generating all kinds of miracles for the 22nd century. So here we are. We look backwards, and we're rooted in a story of thousands of years, but we look forward, and we're inventing the future. That's a miracle every single day.
Well, I want you to know the history, so let's just take the time to go back to 1948. So Israel, David Ben-Gurion declares from Independence Hall that he declares that Israel is now a nation, and he does that in accordance with the UN resolution. The UN said, yes, you can declare a Jewish state, you can declare a Palestinian state. All in accord with international law, all in accord with the League of Nations established in 1922 with the San Remo Accords, a British mandate to create a Jewish state and create a Palestinian state. So at the end of the mandate, Israel announces, now what happens? Midnight, all the Arab nations surrounding Israel declare war on the newly created state. And in that declaration of war, they encourage Arabs living there to leave so that they won't be hurt by their planes and their shells and their bombing. They voluntarily leave. Now, at the same time, all the Arab nations surrounding Israel declare it to be illegal to be Jewish and live in their country. So there was this mass expulsion. 600,000, that's the estimate, Arabs left the territory of Israel. Over 1 million Jews were expelled. Now, let me underline the seriousness of this. If you were Jewish and you were caught in the Jewish quarter of Jerusalem, that was under the control of Jordan at that time. If you were caught in Jerusalem, that meant death. Every single synagogue in the West Bank, every synagogue in the Jewish quarter, all of them were destroyed. So what's the Nakba here? Well, yeah, it's a catastrophe. And the biggest catastrophe is the descendants of Abraham couldn't live together in peace. They could have had a great miracle. They could have done that. We're seeing it break out now with the Abraham Accords to say, yes, let's all come together as brothers and live at peace. So there's your background, there's your history. So when you hear this, say, well, you can't change the history. You can't change that from 1948 to 1967, it was illegal to be Jewish in the Jewish quarter of Jerusalem. Chris Mitchell now joins us from Jerusalem. So, Chris, what's behind this decision for the UN to ignore its own history and observe Nakba?
Well, this is a General Assembly resolution, Gordon. It was not the UN Security Council where, the U.S. could have vetoed such a resolution. And within the General Assembly, the Palestinians enjoy a majority. So the resolution actually for Nakba to be celebrated today was passed last December. And by doing so, as you pointed out, they ignored the role of the UN in voting for a Jewish and an Arab state on November 29, 1947. Which led to the establishment of Israel on May 14, 1948. And as you said, that's when the Arab nations attacked Israel, trying to drive it into the sea. And as Erdogan, the ambassador of Israel, mentioned as well, really ignoring the other Nakba, which is when so many Jews from Iraq, from Syria, from Lebanon were expelled after the establishment of the State of Israel.
Well, the ceasefire with the Palestinian Islamic Jihad seems to be holding. What's the likelihood of more violence, and do you think Hamas will get involved in the near future?
Well, Gordon, I think most people here feel it is the end of fighting. The ceasefire seems to be holding for now, but it's really just a pause between Israel and these Islamic groups in the Gaza Strip. Hamas stayed on the sidelines this time. They have a different agenda. They're actually more affiliated with Egypt. The Islamic Jihad is really a direct proxy of Iran. And so part of Hamas's agenda right now, they control Gaza, but they also want to get a foothold in the West Bank, that is Judea and Samaria. And here in Jerusalem, they want to replace Mahmoud Abbas as the head of the Palestinian Authority. So they want to be the unquestioned leader of Palestine. So strategically, they just stayed out of the fray right now. And as I said, Islamic Jihad is a proxy of Iran. Somebody has said that, Iran will fight to the last Palestinians, and they use all these proxies in the region, whether it's Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas, and Islamic Jihad, even the Houthis down in Yemen. They're surrounding Israel, and they want to be activated at a time of Iran's choosing. That's why it's such a threat to Israel.
Well, millions of Christians are praying for Israel right now. Tell us about the Isaiah 62 fast movement.
Well, it's a 21-day time of fasting and prayer for Israel. It began May 7th. It's going to end on Pentecost Sunday on May 28th. Mike Bickle of the International House of Prayer began this, and he didn't even realize this, but it's gone viral. It's gone global. Thousands of ministries, including CBN, and millions of Christians around the world are praying for Israel based on Isaiah chapter 62, which says, in part, I have set watchmen on your walls, O Jerusalem, who will give me no rest till he makes Jerusalem a praise in all the earth. That's why it's so important to be praying for Israel as it faces unprecedented threats internally and externally. So the church right now is standing in the gap pretty much the way Queen Esther did for the Jewish people about 2,500 years ago.
Well, Chris, thanks for joining us, and I encourage everyone watching to join in on praying for Israel. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. That's one of the commandments in the Old Testament, and we as Christians, let's observe that. Let's observe praying for the peace of Jerusalem. And in that prayer, let's remind Palestinian Arabs that if you're an Israeli Arab citizen, you have a much higher standard of living. What would happen if there were a true Palestinian state? What would happen if you laid down all the weapons and stopped all the fighting and said, let's live together in peace? Well, I know what would happen, and you know what would happen. You would absolutely break out in prosperity. Why wouldn't you do that for your children, for your children's children? Why not? Let's have peace in Jerusalem. Well, in other news, a surprise at the southern border. The Department of Homeland Security reports that the number of migrants has dropped since the expiration of Title 42. And Mark Martin explains.
Many predicted the U.S.-Mexico border would see a huge influx of migrants as Title 42 ended last week. But DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas says there's been an approximately 50% drop in the days since it expired. The administration is claiming stricter asylum-seeking policies put in place last week are making a difference.
They have gone down. My hope is they'll continue to go down, but we have a lot more work to do. And we need some more help from the Congress as well, in terms of funding and legislative changes.
Republicans are pushing back. On ABC's This Week, GOP Representative Michael McCall pointed out that administration policies over the past 2.5 years created a crisis at the border with a record 5 million people entering illegally. He said the new policies are similar to Republican initiatives in a bill passed by the House last week, which the White House called dead on arrival.
It's interesting that 2.5 years later, they're now walking this back and trying to implement something, MPP-like, but not exactly. We passed a border security bill this week in Congress. My portion was to codify and authorize into law the migrant protection protocols.
The new restrictions include non-Mexican migrants seeking asylum must prove they've been denied protection from a country they passed through on their way to the U.S. They also have to use a federal app to make an appointment. And anyone caught re-entering the country after being expelled will be denied entry to the U.S. for at least 5 years. The ACLU is suing the Biden administration over the new policies, claiming they're unlawful. Mayorkas disagrees.
There is a safe, lawful, and orderly way to reach the United States and seek humanitarian relief, and that is through the lawful pathways that we have expanded under President Biden's leadership.
The administration is also pushing back against a Florida federal judge's ruling that migrants have to be issued a court date before they can be released. Meanwhile, sources at U.S. Customs and Border Protection told Fox News that agents apprehended an Afghan national last week who's on the FBI's terror watch list. He reportedly crossed into the U.S. illegally in California. Mark Martin, CBN News.
Well, it's about time to get some good news from our southern border, and this is really wonderful news. And if it just took the administration saying the border is not open, we're not going to take any sort of asylum requests unless you had first applied in another country. If it was that simple, I applaud it. Yay, it's about time.